Before this story begins, I need to say something important. This is not a fictional horror story. What you're about to hear is based on real events, real records, and real people who were never found. No jump scares, no loud sounds, just facts and unanswered questions. If you're listening late at night or alone, I suggest you keep the lights on, because some stories don't try to scare you. They just stay with you long after they're over. This is one of them. This happened in Japan during the 2011 tsunami. Most people remember the 2011 Japan tsunami for the destruction it caused on land. Entire towns were erased. Thousands of lives were lost. But very few people know what happened out at sea that night. This is the story of a passenger ferry that was officially listed as missing, not destroyed. No wreckage, no bodies, no final distress call. And what was found weeks later raised questions that Japan's maritime authorities quietly buried. The ferry was called Kibo Maru, which loosely translates to Ship of Hope. It wasn't a large vessel, just a regional passenger ferry that traveled between small coastal ports in northeastern Japan. On March 11, 2011, it left port in the late afternoon, carrying 32 passengers and 8 crew members. The weather was calm. The sea was unusually still. At 2:46 p.m., the earthquake hit. On land, buildings collapsed. On the ocean, the water didn't rage. It pulled back unnaturally, as if the sea itself was holding its breath. The captain of the Kibo Maru was an experienced sailor. According to later investigations, he immediately turned the ship away from shore, following tsunami safety protocol. Deep water is safer than shallow coastal areas. At 3:02 p.m., the ferry made its last confirmed radio contact. The captain's voice was steady, but tense. "We are moving further offshore. The water level is behaving strangely." That was it. No panic, no mayday call, no screaming, just silence. Radar stations continued tracking the ferry for another 12 minutes. Then, without warning, the blip stopped moving. It didn't fade out. It didn't scatter like debris. It simply froze, right in the middle of open water. Operators assumed the radar had malfunctioned. After all, the entire region was in chaos. By nightfall, the Kibo Maru was officially declared unreachable. Search operations began the next morning. Helicopters scanned the ocean. Coast Guard ships circled the coordinates where the radar signal had stopped. They found nothing. No oil slick, no floating luggage, no wood fragments, as if the ferry had been lifted out of existence. After 7 days, the search was quietly scaled back. The passengers were presumed dead, victims of the tsunami. Families were given compensation, memorials were held, and the Kibo Maru was added to a long list of losses from that tragic day. 3 weeks later, a small fishing trawler made a discovery it was never supposed to make. The crew was fishing far outside their usual zone when they spotted a dark shape on the horizon. At first, they thought it was debris. Then they realized it was a ship, floating perfectly upright, with its lights still on. The name Kibo Maru was still painted on the side. When the fishermen approached, something immediately felt wrong. The sea around the ferry was calm, too calm. No waves touched its hull. They called out. No response. They circled the ship and noticed something unsettling. There was no visible damage, no cracks, no flood marks, no signs of a tsunami ever touching it. Against every instinct they had, two fishermen climbed aboard. The inside of the ferry looked normal. Personal bags were neatly stored. Shoes were lined up near the seating area. Half-finished drinks sat in cup holders. In the dining section, plates of food were still on the tables, moldy now, but untouched. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture, just absence. Then they reached the bridge. The captain's chair was empty. The navigation systems were still powered on, though the engines were dead. And on the captain's desk was the ship's logbook. The last entry was dated March 11th, 2013, 3:14 p.m. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. It read, "The water is not moving. They are standing on the surface. Passengers are seeing them too. We are not alone." There were no further entries. Authorities arrived within hours. The fishermen were told not to speak about what they had seen. Their statements were classified. The ferry was towed to a restricted naval dock away from media attention. Officially, the government announced that the ship had been found adrift and that all occupants were presumed swept overboard during the tsunami. But several crew members involved in securing the ferry later came forward anonymously, and their stories matched. They said that when night fell, sounds echoed through the empty ship. Stepfalls, whispers. One sailor reported seeing wet footprints forming on the bridge floor, leading nowhere. Another refused to step inside after he claimed he saw silhouettes through the windows, standing perfectly still, facing the sea. None of these incidents were recorded in official reports. The most disturbing detail came from a maintenance worker assigned to inspect the hull. He noticed something impossible. The underside of the ship showed no marine growth at all. No algae, no barnacles, as if the ferry had not been in the ocean for weeks, but had been placed back into it recently. The Kibo Maru was dismantled 6 months later. No public ceremony, no documentation released. But one final detail remains unexplained. Every year, on March 11th, fishermen in the same region report seeing a ship's lights far offshore, always stationary, always silent, and always gone by morning.